Emma Caldwell adjusted the straps of her backpack as she surveyed the rolling hills of western Montana. The late September sun cast long shadows across the valley, painting the landscape in hues of amber and gold. She checked her GPS coordinates against the old map her grandfather had given her. His handwriting faded, but still legible in the corners. "Are you sure this is the place?" Daniel asked, wiping sweat from his brow. Her brother had been skeptical about this journey from the start, but had reluctantly agreed to accompany her on what he called her wild goose chase. According to Grandpa's notes, the old Blackwood Ranch should be just beyond that ridge, Emma replied, pointing to a gentle slope ahead. He marked it specifically, said it was important I find it someday. The siblings had been hiking for 3 hours since leaving their rental car at the edge of public land. Their grandfather, Joseph Caldwell, had passed away 6 months ago, leaving Emma a weathered journal filled with stories of his youth in Montana and detailed descriptions of his friendship with a man named Thomas Blackwood, an old rancher who had apparently meant a great deal to him. As they crested the hill, Emma's heart sank. Where she had expected to find at least the ruins of an old cabin, there was only an open meadow dotted with wildflowers and surrounded by aspens turning golden with the season. "There's nothing here, Em," Daniel sighed, dropping his pack on the ground. Emma pulled out her grandfather's journal, flipping to the page with the hand-drawn map. "This has to be it. The creek to the west, the 3 peaks to the north, everything matches." She walked slowly into the meadow, her eyes scanning the ground. Nature had reclaimed whatever structure once stood here, but as she approached the center of the clearing, something caught her eye. A single feather, its dark brown surface streaked with white, stuck upright in the soil as if deliberately placed. "Dan, look at this," she called, kneeling beside it. Daniel joined her, frowning. "A golden eagle feather? That's protected under federal law, you know. We shouldn't touch it." "I know that," Emma said, "but don't you find it strange? Right where the cabin should be." She carefully photographed the feather without disturbing it, then opened her grandfather's journal again. "Listen to this. Thomas kept a single golden eagle feather above his door. Said it reminded him of freedom and responsibility in equal measure. The bird had saved his life once, he claimed, though he never would tell me how." As the wind rustled through the meadow, Emma felt a profound connection to this place, to her grandfather's past, and to the mysterious Thomas Blackwood. She sat down beside the feather and began reading more entries from the journal aloud to Daniel. July 1962. Visited Thomas at his cabin today. At 73. He still rises before dawn to tend his small herd. He refuses all offers of help, stubborn as ever. The man lives with such purpose, though he speaks to almost no one but me and his cattle. I've asked him why he never married, never had a family. He just looks to the mountains and says, "Got all the family I need right here, Joey." I don't believe him, though. There's a photograph he keeps by his bed, a woman with kind eyes holding a child. He won't speak of them. Daniel sat beside her, his initial skepticism softening. "Sounds like Grandpa really cared about this guy." "They were friends for decades," Emma replied. "Grandpa visited him every summer until Thomas died in 1978. That was the year before Dad was born. As the afternoon light began to fade, they decided to make camp in the meadow. While Daniel set up their tent, Emma walked the perimeter of what must have been the Blackwood property, trying to imagine the life of the solitary rancher who had meant so much to her grandfather. What had happened to Thomas's cabin? Why had her grandfather been so insistent that she find this place? And what was the significance of the single feather that had somehow remained, years after the old rancher died? The next morning, Emma woke before sunrise. She slipped out of the tent, leaving Daniel still asleep, and walked to where the feather stood in the soil. The meadow was shrouded in mist, giving it an ethereal quality that made her shiver despite her warm jacket. She sat cross-legged on the damp ground and opened her grandfather's journal again, turning to entries she hadn't read before. Her grandfather had been meticulous, dating each visit, describing conversations and observations about Thomas Blackwood and his modest ranch. August 1965. She read quietly to herself. "Thomas seems friendlier this year. I offered again to help him sell this place and move into town. He looked at me like I'd suggested he cut off his own arm. "This land isn't just soil and grass, Joey," he told me. "It's a promise I made." When I asked to whom, he changed the subject as he always does when the conversation turns personal. Emma looked up at the surrounding landscape. The mist was beginning to lift, revealing mountains in the distance, their peaks catching the first light of day. What promise had kept Thomas Blackwood here all those years? "You're up early," Daniel said, emerging from the tent with tousled hair and sleepy eyes. "Couldn't sleep," Emma admitted. "There's something about this place, Dan. It feels important." Daniel stretched and glanced around the meadow. "Well, since we're here, let's do a proper survey. Cabins leave traces, foundation stones, old nails, something. If there really was a structure here, we should find evidence." They spent the morning methodically walking the meadow in a grid pattern. Near where the feather stood, they discovered a few weathered stones that might have once been part of a foundation, and Daniel unearthed several rusted square nails. "Handmade," he observed, showing one to Emma. "Probably from the late 1800s or early 1900s. Your Thomas Blackwood definitely had a cabin here." By midday, they had outlined what appeared to be the cabin's footprint, a modest structure, perhaps 20 by 16 feet. Emma photographed everything, marking measurements in a notebook. "I think I found a well," Daniel called from several yards away. "It's been filled in, but there's a circular stone formation here." As Emma joined him, her phone vibrated in her pocket. She pulled it out, surprised to see she had signal. "Hello," she answered. "Emma Caldwell," an unfamiliar female voice asked. "Yes, that's me. This is Margaret Lawson from the Bitterroot Valley Historical Society. Your mother gave me your number. She said you were looking for information about Thomas Blackwood." Emma's heart raced. She had contacted several historical societies before the trip, but hadn't expected any responses so soon. "Yes, I am. My grandfather, Joseph Caldwell, was his friend." "Well, you're in luck. We have some records related to the Blackwood Ranch, and—" Margaret paused. "More interestingly, we have a box of Thomas Blackwood's personal effects that were donated to the society after his death. No one has really examined them thoroughly. Would you like to come see them?" "Absolutely," Emma replied eagerly. "We can be there tomorrow." After ending the call, she explained the development to Daniel, who seemed relieved they had a new direction. They decided to spend one more night at the meadow before heading to the Historical Society in the morning. As evening approached, Emma returned to reading the journal while Daniel prepared a simple dinner on their camping stove. "September 1970, she read aloud. "Thomas finally told me about Sarah today. We were sitting on his porch, watching a storm roll in over the mountains, when he suddenly said, 'She loved days like this.' When I asked who, he retrieved the photograph he keeps by his bed. Sarah Wilkins. He said her name was, and their daughter, Rebecca. They were to be married in spring of 1929, but the influenza took them both that winter. He'd bought this land for them, had started building the cabin with his own hands. After they died, he finished it anyway and lived here alone. 'A promise is a promise, Joey,' he told me. I said I'd make them a home, and I did." Daniel handed her a tin cup of hot soup. "So that's it. He lived his whole life alone because of a promise to his dead fiancée." Emma shook her head. "There has to be more to the story. Why did Grandpa care so much? And why did he want me specifically to find this place?" As night fell and stars appeared overhead, Emma sat beside the feather, contemplating the life of Thomas Blackwood, a man who had lived decades of solitude, bound by a promise to people long gone. There was something profoundly moving about such devotion, but also something deeply sad. In the darkness, with only their small campfire for light, Emma continued reading from the journal, searching for answers about the old rancher and his connection to her family. The Bitterroot Valley Historical Society occupied a renovated Victorian house in the small town of Hamilton. Its white clapboard exterior and wraparound porch gave it a quaint, welcoming appearance that belied the treasures of local history housed within. Margaret Lawson, a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled into a neat bun, greeted Emma and Daniel at the entrance. "The Caldwell siblings, I presume? Come in, come in. I've set everything up in our research room." She led them through exhibits of pioneer artifacts and black-and-white photographs to a small room at the back of the building. On a large oak table sat a cardboard box labeled Blackwood Estate in faded marker. This was donated in 1978 by the county after Thomas Blackwood's death, Margaret explained. He had no known relatives, so his personal effects that weren't sold at auction came here. No one's shown much interest in them until now. Emma approached the box reverently. "May I?" Margaret nodded. "That's why you're here. I'll leave you to it, but call if you need anything." Once alone, Emma carefully opened the box. Inside were several leather-bound ledgers, a few pieces of correspondence, a pocket watch, a carved wooden box, and an envelope of photographs. She lifted out the photos first, spreading them on the table. Most were landscapes, the ranch in different seasons, cattle grazing on hillsides, mountains in the distance. A few showed a much younger Thomas Blackwood, a tall, lean man with intense eyes and a serious expression. And there it was, the photograph her grandfather had mentioned, a beautiful young woman with a gentle smile, holding a toddler on her lap. Emma turned it over. Written in careful script was, "Sarah and Rebecca, Christmas 1928. 2 months before they died," Emma murmured, showing it to Daniel. Next, she examined the ledgers. They contained meticulous records of the ranch operations, cattle purchases and sales, expenses, weather observations, spanning decades. Thomas Blackwood had been a thorough record keeper, his handwriting consistent and clear throughout the years. Daniel picked up the wooden box, turning it over in his hands. "There's something inside," he said, sliding open a small panel on the bottom. He tipped it, and a key fell into his palm, old and iron, the kind that might open a padlock or small chest. "What do you think it opens?" Emma asked. "No idea," Daniel replied, placing it on the table. "Maybe something that's not here." Emma moved on to the correspondence, mostly business letters related to cattle sales and supply purchases. But at the bottom of the stack, she found a yellowed envelope addressed to Joseph Caldwell in Thomas Blackwood's distinctive handwriting. It was sealed. "Dan," she whispered, holding it up. "This is addressed to Grandpa." "Open it," he urged. With trembling fingers, Emma carefully broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. "Dear Joey," she read aloud, "if you're reading this, I've finally gone to join Sarah and Rebecca. Don't mourn me. I've lived the life I chose, with no regrets. You've been a better friend than I deserved, and there's something I need to ask of you. The eagle feather above my door belongs to someone important. When the time is right, I need you to make sure it finds its way to Emma." Emma stopped reading, her voice catching. "That's me. He knew my name. But how? I wasn't even born when he died." Daniel leaned forward. "Keep reading. I've never told anyone the whole truth about my promise to Sarah. It wasn't just about building a home. Before she died, Sarah made me swear I'd watch over her family's land to the north, land that would one day belong to her brother's descendants. I've kept that promise for 50 years, standing guard over what will someday be Emma's inheritance. The key in my wooden box opens a strong box buried beneath the large stone to the east of my cabin. Inside is everything she'll need. Joey, you'll know when it's time for Emma to learn the truth. Until then, keep my secret as faithfully as you've kept my friendship. With eternal gratitude, Thomas." Emma set the letter down, her mind racing. Sarah's brother's descendants? That must mean Sarah was our great-grandmother's sister, Daniel finished, the realization dawning. Thomas Blackwood spent his life protecting land that would eventually become our family's. Emma thought of the single feather standing where the cabin once stood. "Grandpa must have placed the feather there as a marker," she said. "He knew I'd come looking someday." "But what about this strongbox?" Daniel asked, holding up the iron key. "And what did he mean by Emma's inheritance?" Emma gathered the letter and key, a new determination filling her. "There's only one way to find out. We need to go back to the meadow and find that stone." As they carefully repacked the box, leaving only the letter and key in Emma's possession with Margaret's permission, Emma felt a profound connection not just to her grandfather, but to Thomas Blackwood and the mysterious Sarah. Their lives had been intertwined across generations, leading to this moment. "Do you think the strongbox is still there after all these years?" Daniel asked as they left the Historical Society. Only one way to find out, Emma replied, clutching the key tightly in her hand. The journey back to the meadow seemed quicker than before, Emma's steps energized by purpose. They had stopped in town only long enough to buy supplies and rent a metal detector from a local outfitter. The afternoon sun beat down on them as they hiked the familiar trail, the weight of discovery pressing them forward. "What do you think is in the strongbox?" Daniel asked, adjusting the metal detector on his shoulder. "Land deeds, maybe? Or information about our family?" Emma replied, "Whatever it is, Thomas Blackwood thought it was important enough to protect for decades." When they reached the meadow, everything looked different to Emma now. No longer just an empty field where a cabin once stood, but a place of promise and connection. The feather remained where they had left it, undisturbed by the previous night's gentle breeze. The letter said, "The large stone to the east of my cabin," Emma reminded him, orienting herself by the sun's position. "So if the cabin foundation is here." She walked approximately 20 paces east from where the feather stood. The area was dotted with rocks and boulders, remnants of ancient glacial movement through the valley. After scanning the perimeter, Emma spotted a flat, table-like stone about 3 feet across, partially embedded in the soil. "This has to be it," she said, kneeling beside it. The stone was heavy, seemingly immovable. "Help me try to lift this." Daniel set down the metal detector and joined her. They dug around the edges with their hands, loosening the soil. With considerable effort, they managed to tip the stone onto its side, revealing dark, compacted earth beneath. "Let me try the detector," Daniel said, sweeping the device over the exposed ground. Almost immediately, it emitted a high-pitched beep. "Got something." They took turns digging with a small camp shovel, excavating carefully. About 2 feet down, the shovel struck something solid with a metallic clang. Emma brushed away the remaining soil to reveal a rectangular metal box, roughly the size of a thick hardcover book, weathered but intact. "The strong box," she whispered, lifting it from the earth. It was heavier than she expected, with a simple padlock securing the lid. Her hands trembled slightly as she inserted the iron key from Blackwood's wooden box. The lock resisted at first, decades of soil and moisture having affected its mechanism. Daniel applied a few drops of lubricant from a small container in his pack, and Emma tried again. With a reluctant click, the padlock opened. Emma placed the box on level ground and slowly raised the lid. Inside, protected by a waterproof oilskin wrapper, was a stack of documents, a small leather pouch, and a folded piece of paper on top. Another letter, this one addressed simply to Emma. She unfolded it carefully, the paper crackling with age. "Dear Emma," she read aloud, "we've never met, but I've known of you since before you were born. Your great-grandmother Martha's sister, my Sarah, had a gift of foresight. In the weeks before the influenza took her, she spoke often of a girl named Emma who would come one day to reclaim what was lost. She made me promise to protect this land until you arrived." Emma paused, looking up at Daniel with wide eyes before continuing. "Enclosed you'll find the deed to 320 acres of land adjoining my ranch to the north, land that once belonged to Sarah's family, the Wilkins. Through a legal arrangement with your grandfather Joseph, I've maintained the property taxes and kept the mineral rights secure from those who would exploit them. The contents of the leather pouch will explain why this matters." Daniel reached for the pouch, carefully opening it and emptying the contents into his palm. 3 small, rough stones that caught the sunlight with unexpected brilliance. "Are those diamonds?" he asked incredulously. Emma shook her head. "I don't think so." She picked one up, examining it closely. "They look like sapphires, Montana sapphires. They're found in this region." She returned to the letter. "The Wilkins land sits atop a small deposit of gemstones, not large enough for commercial mining, but valuable nonetheless. Sarah's father discovered them in 1910, but told only his family. When land speculators began pressuring the family to sell in the 1920s, Sarah feared they somehow knew about the gems. She made me swear to keep the land in the family, to wait for you." "This is incredible," Daniel murmured, examining another document from the box, a geological survey map with markings indicating the likely extent of the sapphire deposit. I don't know what kind of woman you'll grow to be, Emma, the letter continued, but Sarah believed in you. She said you would understand the true value of this place beyond any gems it might hold. The eagle feather that hung above my door was a gift from Sarah. In the Wilkins family, it was tradition to give an eagle feather to the guardian of the family's legacy. Now it passes to you. With it comes a choice: sell the land and the knowledge of the sapphires for profit, or preserve this valley, as Sarah would have wanted. I've done my part by keeping this secret for 50 years. The choice is now yours. Thomas Blackwood. Emma lowered the letter, her vision blurring with tears. She looked out across the meadow, trying to process the weight of what she'd just learned. This land, this beautiful, pristine valley, had been protected for generations, waiting for her. What are you going to do? Daniel asked quietly. Emma stood, walking back to where the feather stood in the soil. She carefully, reverently, lifted it from the ground. I think I always knew this place was special, she said. From the moment Grandpa first told me stories about Montana when I was little. It's why I became an environmental scientist. She turned to face her brother, the feather held gently in her hands, the afternoon light illuminating her resolved expression. I'm going to protect it, just like Thomas did, just like Sarah wanted. 6 months later, Emma stood on the ridge overlooking the meadow, now transformed. The foundation of Thomas Blackwood's cabin had been carefully excavated and marked with stakes and preservation tape. A team of university archaeology students worked methodically in the spring sunshine, cataloging each nail, shard of glass, and fragment of the past they uncovered. Professor Caldwell, one of the students called. I think we found the hearth. Emma smiled, still not entirely used to her new title. After returning to Boston following their discovery, she had leveraged her position at the university's Environmental Science Department to establish the Blackwood-Wilkins Conservation Project. The sapphires, valued at nearly $200,000, had been sold to fund the initial phase, with 3 stones kept aside as family heirlooms. Daniel joined her on the ridge, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the research camp set up nearby. The County Historical Society called, he said, handing her a steaming cup. They're thrilled with the oral history recordings. Apparently, 3 more old-timers have come forward with stories about Thomas. He made an impression on people, Emma replied, living out here alone all those years, keeping his promise. The conservation project had grown beyond Emma's initial vision. What began as a simple land trust had evolved into a multifaceted initiative combining historical preservation, environmental conservation, and educational outreach. The 320 acres of the original Wilkins property, along with the Blackwood Ranch land which Emma had purchased from the county, would be permanently protected from development. The Geological Survey team is packing up, Daniel noted, gesturing toward another group of researchers breaking down equipment near the eastern edge of the property. They've confirmed the sapphire deposit is limited to that small pocket we found, not commercially viable, just like Thomas said. Which means no mining companies will be interested, Emma said with satisfaction, though I'm not sure they would have gotten permits anyway, now that the cabin site has historical designation. They walked down to the meadow, where the cornerstone of a small visitor center was being prepared. By summer's end, a modest building would stand near, but not on, the site of Thomas's cabin, housing exhibits about ranching life, the local ecosystem, and the intertwined stories of the Blackwood, Wilkins, and Caldwell families. Have you decided what to do with the feather? Daniel asked as they approached the archaeology team. Emma touched the pocket of her field jacket, where the eagle feather now resided in a protective case. I'm donating it to the center, along with Grandpa's journal and Thomas's letters. They belong here. She had spent countless hours poring over county records, historical documents, and her grandfather's journal, piecing together the full story of Thomas Blackwood and Sarah Wilkins. The narrative that emerged was one of devotion and foresight spanning generations, a man who kept a 50-year promise to protect land for a family not his own, and a grandfather who understood that his granddaughter would someday complete the circle. Miss Caldwell. A woman approached them, notebook in hand. I'm Elaine Wilkins from the Tribune. Do you have time for those questions about the conservation project? Of course, Emma replied. And please, call me Emma. As they walked toward a quiet spot away from the excavation, the reporter flipped through her notes. So, to confirm, you're establishing a permanent trust for this land, with provisions for continued research and educational programs? That's right, Emma said. We've partnered with the university, the Bitterroot Valley Historical Society, and the Montana Land Conservancy. The trust ensures this valley will remain undeveloped and accessible for research and limited public education programs. And what made you decide to invest so much in preserving this particular piece of land? Elaine asked. I understand you've taken a sabbatical from your position at Boston University to oversee this personally. Emma paused, considering how to convey the depth of her connection to this place without revealing the full story of the sapphires, which remained a family secret. This land represents a promise kept across generations, she said finally. Thomas Blackwood protected it for 50 years out of love and loyalty. My grandfather understood its importance. Now it's my turn to ensure it endures. And the significance of the eagle feather that was found here? I understand it's becoming something of a symbol for your conservation project. Emma smiled, looking out across the meadow where wildflowers were beginning to bloom among the grass. The feather represents guardianship, she explained. In many cultures, eagles symbolize perspective, the ability to see both the minute details and the broader picture. That's what we're trying to do here, preserve one small, significant place while acknowledging its connection to the larger landscape and history. As the interview concluded and Emma rejoined the archaeological team, she felt a profound sense of rightness. 6 months ago, she had come here searching for a connection to her grandfather's past. What she had found was not just history, but a purpose and a promise of her own to keep. That evening, as the research teams packed up for the day and the valley grew quiet, Emma walked alone to the center of the meadow. The setting sun cast long shadows across the land, not unlike the day she had first arrived. She knelt where Thomas Blackwood's cabin had once stood, where the eagle feather had marked the spot for her to find. From her pocket, she withdrew a small metal container. Inside was a single sapphire, the smallest of the 3 they had kept, which she carefully buried in the soil. A promise kept, she whispered to the valley, to Thomas, to Sarah, and to all those who had guarded this place before her. And a new one begun.